Gram-Paige offered two radios in 1939. This one right here, sitting on the shelf, 100% restored, complete with the head. We're looking at the side of the head. We'll show you the front in just a moment. There's the front of the head for you on a Gram radio. To be accurate, this is known as a Gram pre-select radio. It's a Philco radio made back in the day. The number on the Gram is as follows. Sitting right here, same radio used by Studebaker, but you'll notice the head on top has a different outside. First one of the capacitors we're going to change is going to be this one right here. And this is all what they call point-to-point wiring. Very old school, of course, because it's an old school radio. We're going to go from this point over to this point with our new capacitor. So this is the original capacitor right there. We're going to show you the capacitor we used in the restoration of my radio. Plus we'll show you a shot of the capacitor we're using. We could not get orange caps like we had in there, so we've got these from Illinois' capacitor instead. I should say Illinois, that's the correct way to pronounce it. But I'll show you a close-up shot of that capacitor in just a moment. First thing we have to do is get the old capacitor undone. Usually these things are somewhat tied on, so we got to see if that's what we've got. So it's not just quite as easy as you think it's going to be to get them out. Now, one thing I can do if I have to is I can just cut it. We'll see if we can get it to unsolder enough so I can see what I've got here. And so far, I'm going to try moving this little guy right next to it so we don't violate it. So it's really tight. Yeah, it's a little less tight, but not much. So we got the one end off. We have great plenty here of our new capacitor. And we can even wrap it around the top there like that to start with. And we're going to solder it in place. Some real fine solder here. Just a teensy bit of flex, and we'll see what we can do with this. That's thoroughly soldered. Nice, nice, nice. We will get rid of our tail. Now we'll disconnect our opposite end. The capacitor being used here is not polarized. We're replacing an old wax capacitor. And these wax capacitors, you know, good grief, it's like 80 years old. It's shot, it's done. So it's being thoroughly replaced. That down just a bit. And we'll take a teeny bit of flux again. And we'll solder this one here. Looks like we've got that soldered in place. You got the wire without using two tools. So the first one's in. You notice the huge size difference. has gone from this wax capacitor by Philco back in the day, which was a 30-444-X G5, I think it's a G, no, it's a 0.5 microfarads, that's what it is. That's the old Philco one, replaced with this new one. So it's one capacitor down. Next, we're going to replace this capacitor right here, going from this point over to this point. It'll be the same procedure as before. We'll show you the capacitor in my radio, followed by showing you the capacitor that we're putting in this radio. We'll just clip the end because we do know it's going to be fastened fairly tightly around there. Push that out of the way. And we're going to take our new one. Because we need most of the length, we're going to leave the legs long on this. And get this position with the legs long. Let's turn around, only so that we can read it better for you a little later on. I'm going to fasten it like that on the one end. And we'll give it a little tip here, again for viewing later more than anything. That wasn't nice. There we go. That's what we want. I'm going to solder that end on. Opposite end, do the same thing. We'll cut it off and solder it in place. Solder. Here's the original capacitor for that point. It was 200 volts. It's a 30-4479S Philco. And it's 0.01 microfarads. Three capacitors we're going to do are all going to be put in with identical capacitors. We're going to do this one here, and this one here. We'll show you the capacitor as used in the other radio, and then we're going to show you the capacitor we're going to be using at this time. We'll start with this one on this side. Again, these are totally wrapped around the spots where they are attached. And so I'm going to endeavor to cut them out. We'll get one side and then we'll get the other. So get that side out. This is bent up out of the way. this one is different because they've got an insulation piece here because they don't want to hit any of the pins. So we are going to do the same thing, and we're going to save the insulation piece here. So I'm going to cut this off a couple of times. Got that off. I'll take the insulation piece out. I'm going to be attaching down here. Put the original insulation piece on here. So the end result is that we won't touch anything either when we get it all soldered into place. We replaced this capacitor. The original there is a 0.05 microfarad rated at 200 volts. Then we also replaced this capacitor, the original there, 0.05 microfarads rated at 200 volts. And then we also did this one up here, and that's a 0.05 microfarad rated at 200 volts. So this one, and this one are all the same. We've already shown you the replacements for those. Next up, we're going to do the one here. We've removed it. It goes from this point to this point. You can see the spots we cut off. That's a 0.006 microfarad. Now this one's got 1,000 volts on it. It's not necessary to be that high. Shouldn't ever see over 450 in a radio like this anyway. So we're going to be using a 400 volt one, and it's a 103K that we're going to put in here at this point to this point across the transformer. So that's our next installation. Yes, this one's the same, 0.006 microfarads right here. So we are going to put the same capacitor in place of this one. This one, you'll notice, has insulation on one end of it. We'll reuse the insulation too, right there. To the wire itself. This large paper capacitor went from this point to this point. And it's number 60 on the drawing. It is at 0.0075 microfarads. We do not have one for that, but we've got a couple of 473Ks, which means we'll be a little bit more capacitance across this point, but we're going to use these in parallel because I have them. So we'll go from there to there in parallel with these two. Last capacitor to replace on the radio here on the underside is this 0.01 microfarad that runs from this point to this point. So that will be replaced now. Here we have our antenna connector from the radio with a 0.01 microfarad capacitor in it. We just got some more capacitors here, 0.01 microfarad capacitors. These are rated at 630 volts. And we got to put this little capacitor where this giant wax capacitor is. Now, because these have short legs, these capacitors, I'm going to cut the capacitor out and leaving as much wire as possible here to attach to it. If necessary, we'll have to get something to lengthen stuff, which is probably going to be what we're going to have to do, but we'll see. Yeah, we're going to have to lengthen one side at least to make this work. Alright, as you can see, it's substantially lengthened the leg on the one side using part of one of the old capacitor legs. And now I have also got the other leg ready to solder here. Yep, she's soldered in place.